Well, welcome. Tonight, we look at a different view. Not the conservative or liberal view that we normally do, but I guess something more towards the middle, the libertarian view. Why don't we start with introductions?
Hi, I'm Mike Soares. I'm a registered Republican, part of the Milford RTC, but I have strong libertarian views.
Good evening, Al. Mike, my name is Mike Schiavi. I'm a registered Democrat, but I kind of look at all the views, make objective decisions based on them.
I'm Arthur Segalia, and I'm a registered independent, and I lean very strongly towards the conservative libertarian end of the spectrum.
Now, Arthur, are you registered independent as part of the independent party, or are you like me with that registered unenrolled?
No, I'm registered as an independent.
Because that's rare. I mean, so many people who say I'm independent really are unenrolled. I hate the tag because it makes it feel like I'm not interested. I'm unenrolled. I'm, not interested.
I am independent.
So let's start. What is a libertarian?
A libertarian, we talk a lot about left and right and middle, but libertarian, you got to think more two-dimensional or three-dimensional, where there's freedom, liberty, and authoritarian, and they're very on the the high on the libertarian liberty scale.
So less government?
Less government, more personal freedoms. What you do is your business. If it doesn't affect me, I have no right to impose my morality on you.
So the rule of thumb is that the Republicans want government in the bedroom and out of the boardroom, and Democrats want government in the boardroom and out of the bedroom, and libertarians don't want government anywhere.
Arthur?
I think that both Republicans and Democrats tend to assume responsibility for tasks or responsibilities which are really individual. I think a lot of the especially the left-leaning establishment tends to usurp an individual's right and take from him or her the wherewithal to do what they see as appropriate toward their fellow citizens and themselves.
Is it fair that most people think of libertarians as kind of liberal-ish Republicans or conservative-ish Democrats, kind of in the middle of both?
I can see how one could describe that label, because they are seen sometimes as being on this side, on this issue. They find allies when it comes to marijuana debate, and they find allies with Republicans when it comes to fiscal conservatism. But it really isn't like I said, it's more three-dimensional. You can't just say, oh, you're left-leaning blue, you're right-leaning, red, you must be purple in the middle.
I like purple.
Yeah, but it's very different than being a moderate on either side. You're kind of, I don't want to say an extremist, but you have strong liberty views.
Right. Libertarians would be against a lot of the things the Republicans are. They don't want us to be an expansionist government. They don't want us to be an international country. They don't want us being the police of the world. Domestically, they want everyone is pretty much on your own. You make your world, your life in this world. You shouldn't be asking for handouts, and government should only be there for basic things in order to keep the country stable and as a nation. Now, there's that fine line. Where do you draw? How far should the government do, and what shouldn't it do? You can make an argument that makes that line start getting blurry. So it's very difficult to run that argument that government shouldn't be doing more. Democrats, of course, want government to take up a social environment. They want government to be there, as FDR did, with his New Deal and the like, to help society keep it from collapsing. If you let capitalism run by itself, as it did in the 1800s, you had booms and busts. Government keeps it in there to keep the troughs and the waves much smaller. so that you can go through recessions. They used to call them panics, right? And all of a sudden, people would be out of work, and society would fall apart, and you'd have to build it back up. So government's there to keep it in an area that's, can be managed. And but libertarians would fight against that. They would say, no, you shouldn't be doing that.
If you think of a grid which goes left or Democrat, right or Republican, anarchy and totalitarianism, libertarians populate the top of that with minimal government, either based upon democratic or left-leaning principles or Republican or right-leaning liberal policies. So they really aren't mutually exclusive. You can be a left-leaning totalitarian, that makes you a communist. You can be a right-leaning totalitarian, that makes you a Nazi.
A dictator.
Yeah. Or you can have anarchy. I mean, once you get too far up that list, it doesn't really matter. There is no control over...
So let's look at a practical question. I mean, we've had a horrible situation in Las Vegas. So immediately, I start hearing the gun control lobby screaming, now is the time for major gun control. I hear the gun lobby screaming, if more people had had guns, they could stop these things. Where do libertarians fall out on gun control?
Libertarians fall where each individual libertarian falls. That's to say a libertarian policy is almost
Is it an oxymoron?
Yeah. My question to my daughter, who I love, who posted on her Facebook page that we really need to get gun control now, is tell me what law you would have enacted to prevent what happened in Las Vegas. And I will absolutely support that law because it is the government's responsibility to protect its citizens. But posting signs on doors that say this is a gun-free zone doesn't really stop people.
But we've heard it. They've said, if you outlawed, you pass a law that says you will not have semi-automatic weapons or kits to make them automatic, then nobody would buy them. All the criminals would follow the law and not buy those type of weapons.
Well, I'm not a gun expert, so I don't know, but I suspect that you can't just chop a piece off a semi-automatic gun and make it an automatic.
Actually, for $50, you can buy a kit to take a semi-automatic. Basically, what you're doing is filing down the firing pin.
Yeah,
The piece that holds it,
I just don't know.
$50, you can make it automatic.
I don't know if I would agree with $50. Yes, you could purchase a kit. It's illegal, but you could purchase a kit, modify the weapon. You'd have to have a certain amount of knowledge and skill and access to these kits. But it's not that simple, but it is doable. I hear what you're saying.
But I guess my question, Michael, is if I pass the law, would the criminals?
No, absolutely not. I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there is a dark web out there, an internet behind the internet. I've heard people seeing grenade launchers for sale. You could buy a grenade launcher on the dark web. So we could ban weapons all day long. And unlike Australia, that is an island, I don't think we would be
Or they're a
able.
continent. I don't know if they're an island.
But they're an island.
It's because it's surrounded by water, as the president told us, right?
But so the whole country is essentially enacted this ban. But I mean,
It's worked,
you could
right?
easily drive up from Mexico with these arms. We know the border is porous, and
There was a wall going
and the
up.
criminals have. I wish the wall was going up, and you would have access to these weapons. Unfortunately for criminals, so I don't think there's
When
any
a-
one easy solution to this.
When a Swiss teen goes into his or her mandatory military training, they're issued a weapon. And when they're discharged, they can take that weapon home. So the problem is really not, and Switzerland has a very low, higher than Australia, but a very low homicide rate by gun. unlike the United States. The United States problem is not guns. The United States problem is mental.
It's violence in general.
It's mental health. You would think that in an area like Massachusetts, with Boston and McLean Hospital and all the areas nearby which provide mental health care, that you would have easy access to mental health care. And nothing, I'll tell you as a professional, nothing is further from the truth, especially for teens and young adults.
Now, do you have an issue with having to pass a background check before you buy a weapon?
I don't.
No, you can't drive a car without taking a
See,
test.
I'm a gun owner. I've got my...
You have one with you right now, Al?
No.
Oh, okay.
I've got my Ithaca Featherlight that I've had since I was a teenager, and it's always been home.
Right.
But if I wanted to buy a new gun, I guess I don't have a problem saying I'm going to a gun store Saturday.
Right.
I'll go down, talk to Tom O'Laughlin or Mike Pasquin, whoever's doing the check. I did my fingerprints for my FID card, and wait 2 days. I mean, to me, that
I
doesn't...
think you should have to wait a month. I think you have to do a complete
yeah, see,
background
Well,
check.
Mike, but again...
And you have to take a course.
And you should have to pay for it.
If I want to drive a car, we've said there are rules. It's not an entitlement.
Right.
You have to pass a driver's test, you have to take a course. And I guess there's the problem I have. I don't like the idea of you banning me from having a gun, but my responsibility is mine. The responsibility is mine, that I put a trigger lock on it, I do all the things to make it safe. So I guess I'm kind of stuck in the middle, because to me it's not all or nothing.
No, and I think you can have, some checks and balances. You mentioned the background check. I've never been opposed to a background check. I think it's a logical thing to do. It's a little bit different than getting your license for driving a car. Driving a car isn't an entitlement. Having your right to bear arms kind of is. It's a right. So I don't think there should be a fee associated with the permit. I think it should be something that here we are as a state. We want to do right by our citizens by making sure that you're not a felon, that you don't have
That you don't have mental health issues.
So I think that should be something where you do the check and you don't have to pay a fee, because I think paying for a fee now no longer feels like a right.
You're saying it because if you have a fee, you're discriminating against people that couldn't afford the fee?
Correct.
Well, I don't think it's an absolute right. I mean, it says right to keep and bear arms. Of course, it does talk about a well-regulated militia before that in the amendment. But
The
you would
purpose
think...
clause.
What's that?
The purpose clause, not the
Yes.
rights
But
clause.
Michael, would anybody really argue that for the
But then you go back
price,
to Article 3, Section 2, but that's beside the point.
the
Okay.
price of the background check, wouldn't you rather pay that as part of your overall donation to the government than not have people get background checks?
So you're asking the government to pay for all this stuff?
No, I'm asking you as a
I think
taxpayer.
that, no, so the taxpayer should pay for it? Why shouldn't the person that's going to get the license pay for it?
Because it's a
Because
right.
it's for your protection. The guy who's buying the gun is not protected by the background check. You or we as the citizenry are protected by the background check. I think you sort of get into the weeds when you start talking about fees for something like
Well,
that.
as long as they're
because
not
that-
onerous.
As
I
long
mean,
as they're not onerous.
If you
then-
can afford to buy a $200 pistol,
Maybe I can't. Maybe I inherited one from my father. Maybe I can't afford
that's a
the
good point.
$200
And I was going to say, if they charge you $10 for your FID card and background check,
Yeah, but it's not $10.
I don't know how much I paid.
It's $100 for the fee, it's $100 for the course, and it's $100 every renewal, which
Oh,
could be every year or every 5 years, depending on whether or not you're a resident of Massachusetts.
so you're okay with doing the background check?
I'm okay with doing the background check. It should be valid in every state. I will say that. It makes no sense that I have my right to carry in Massachusetts. I drive, 10, 15 minutes down the road to Woonsocket. Suddenly, I'm a felon if I carry. My rights don't
That
carry.
doesn't make any sense to me, because if I get a driver's license in Massachusetts, I can drive my car anywhere.
There's no reciprocity, unfortunately. They're working on that in Congress.
But then it should be a
Right.
federal law.
That's a state rights
Now you're
issue
moving
then,
it up,
right?
you're adding government, because you're saying, right now, it's a state control action. Each state decides, because places like Virginia, I mean, are notorious for making it much easier to buy firearms.
Sure, there are states that do constitutional carry. Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont all do constitutional carry now. 2 of them are recent, New Hampshire and
Now,
Maine.
when you say constitutional carry,
You simply pass a background check. There's no permit, there's no fee. You simply pass a background
and I
check.
can carry a pistol.
Here's your pistol.
You know, the example that points up the inadequacy of, quote, gun control as solving our problem is no place has more strict gun laws than Chicago,
Yes.
murder capital of the world, well,
By
at least
gun.
of this country. Yeah. So it makes no sense to just focus in on outlawing guns.
Well, you know, Arthur, I kept hearing if guns were outlawed, only outlaws would have guns. You know, and there's a bit of sense to that that says criminals don't tend to follow the law.
Yeah.
So when you passed a law that you have to have a trigger guard, okay, I went out and I bought a trigger guard. I wonder how many of those people in the gangs that are shooting up Chicago go home at night and put a trigger guard on their pistol. So I'm caught because I don't know how to fix it. I wish I could understand how to pass a law or do something.
No, you can't pass a law. The right for us to have guns is part of the beginning of the country, and so we should just live with it. I mean, if I don't want a gun, that's fine. If you want one, fine. But, you know, the question is, do you stay within the laws that are around having an armed weapon, right? For example, there were laws in Massachusetts about what you can hunt with. You can't hunt with single-shot rifles because, you know, you
Can't hunt with rifles in Massachusetts.
can hunt with
can't hunt-
shotguns.
Can't hunt
You can't
deer.
hunt
That's a
deer.
shotgun.
You
Can't hunt deer
Can't
with a
hunt deer.
rifle.
Well, I don't know what else you're hunting.
Coyotes, rabbits, squirrels.
Oh, that's hunting?
That's hunting.
Right.
Oh,
But
Buana,
you need a
big,
hunt-
big
you-
game hunter, chase that
I didn't say
vicious squirrel.
And you can shoot bear if you want big game. You can shoot
Bear?
a bear.
Well, the bears are
with a
coming
rifle.
back.
With a
yes.
rifle?
With a rifle.
Single-shot
Really?
It
rifle.
has to be above 23 caliber, so you can't use a standard.
Can't
AR.
use a 22.
Yeah, typically an AR-15 is a .22 caliber, so you can't use one of those. But anything bigger than that.
With a
you can use.
22, all you're going to do is really annoy
it
the
off.
bear. I'm
And
sorry.
you have the
I think a 220 Swift would take care of a bear.
That's a lot of grains of
But then
powder
you-
behind
no,
that
but
bullet.
if you're hunting near a neighborhood, then you have the fear that if you miss your target,
Yeah.
it's going to go through someone's bathroom window, right?
Well, that used to be my 223. Little tiny bullet, but a heck of a lot of powder. That thing shot flat forever.
Yeah.
But again, it went forever. And you couldn't use it around here because, you know, a mile down the road, you could hurt somebody without.
Right.
And there are
Getting
a lot
back-
of rules around hunting, to your point, and a lot of them also apply to, you know, you can't discharge a firearm in your backyard if you're 500 feet from your
Right.
neighbors.
Right.
You know, so at least in Massachusetts, you have a lot of what we would consider, most people would consider common sense.
Now, how
Right,
about
densely populated
the
areas.
logic
Yeah.
that there are certain arms that there's no
I don't agree
reason
with
to
that at all.
have? I mean,
Well-
when you look at
Define arms, right? I mean, can I have a bazooka?
assault, well, there you go.
That's explosives.
A machine gun you cannot have
You can't,
unless you buy an old one.
Right.
You can't buy new ones. But
buy
you
new
need a special license to legally have a machine gun. But assault rifles, everybody rallies around the fact that there's no hunting reason for an assault rifle.
Whoopi Goldberg and Kathy Griffin talk a lot about assault rifles, and they really don't know what they're talking about. Like I said, I'm not a gun expert, but you can hang a stock and a handle on a standard hunting rifle and make it look like an assault rifle.
Right.
And it doesn't do anything different from what that hunting rifle would do.
the problem is, the legal term is assault weapon. And pistols, shotguns, rifles can all be considered assault weapons. It, like Arthur's saying, it's all
Right.
about how they worded the law, and it's, you know, if you have a pistol grip or a bayonet log, somehow it's more dangerous than my 12 gauge shotgun that could do a whole put a giant
Yeah,
hole
you put
in.
some double-aught buck in that, and that's going to
It makes no
ruin
sense
your
that
day.
somehow my 22 caliber, caliber AR is more regulated than my 12 gauge shotgun. To me, that doesn't make any sense.
The ARs look mean. They look
They
like
look
an
mean.
M16.
Right,
And
and-
supposedly you can easily buy the
Again,
kit.
it's not easy.
No, I
And
laugh.
these folks are looking into, or trying to look into, the mentality of the person that owns that gun. Why would you want to have a gun
Right.
that looks like
Right.
a military assault weapon?
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
look at a lot of the assault weapons. I don't know if you ever shot an AK-47. There's a reason there's a 3, there's a 1, a 3, and a full auto. The 3 is because when, yeah, exactly. I mean, I love Rambo with his 50 caliber, boom, boom, holding it down. It's like there's a reason they bolt that to a Jeep. But even in AK-47, the 3 shots is because when I shot at 1, 2, 3, I'm up there now.
Yeah.
So
There's
shots 4, 5, 6
very little control.
are shooting ducks. So, you know, they limit you even with fully automatic AK-47s and fully automatic M16s to 3 shots because they want 1, 2, 3, bring it back down. So to me, I don't understand this whole thing about, well, we need fully automatic and that makes it worse. Or if I have not the 15-round clip,
Right.
but the 30 or the 50, that makes it much more dangerous. Part of me can argue, what the hell do you need a 50-round clip for?
Well-
It's like the old Tommy guns, you know,
Sure.
in Chicago, with the round 50-round clips.
Well, you know, it's a tragedy when the reason these come about, and we have these incidents like we had, horrific incidents like we had in Las Vegas, and then that's why you have these reactionary arguments about how big weapons should be,
But to
and what they
reload,
hold and reload.
it's 2 seconds. If I buy enough clips of 15,
So you walk into the hotel with 15 clips instead of
well,
3
that's what the
clips?
guy, no, you just keep walking in
Yeah.
with
Right.
different duffel
I know.
bags, and they find 10 guns. But I mean, I can buy 10, 15, or 30-round clips, and in 2 seconds be popping them.
And what you just said just right there, even if you somehow effectively limited magazines to 10 rounds, you could just buy 10 guns.
Or
They
10
have
clips.
10 rounds each. You do 10 shots with
Oh.
one, you pick up the other. You don't even have to reload, you just pick up a different gun. If you're in a hotel room, if they're all laid out in the bed, it's tragic, but there's no solution. There's no one solution that would solve this. There are things that could be effective, like mental health screening or treatment.
Yeah.
But
See, that make the root issue, the root cause, when we do any kind of CAPA, you know, corrective action, preventive action, you try and go back to the root cause. And the root cause doesn't seem to be the gun.
root cause is a crazy person.
I would be for any law that would protect the public from things like Las Vegas or Sandy Hook. But I'm
course.
not,
Who
I
wouldn't?
don't know what those laws are.
Right.
And I haven't heard anybody articulate what those laws should be. Putting signs on school that says no gun zone probably is not going to work.
Again, you're assuming the criminals are going to say, oh,
Yep, got to go someplace
it's
else.
against the
It's a
law
no
to
gun
carry
zone.
a gun past here. I'll just put my pistols away.
Making it illegal to own a gun in Chicago.
Yeah, it
Didn't
didn't
work.
do much, does it? But I mean, then I see what's with the silencer? We're trying to,
It's a sound suppressor.
okay,
And it's the Protection of Hearing Act. So
come on.
guns are loud.
Yeah.
Guns are very loud.
They're allowed for a reason.
They're not loud for a reason. They're loud because
You have a lot of powder going-
You have gunpowder, and there's a lot of pressure, and it makes a lot of
And
noise.
motorcycle's loud for a reason, because I want people to know what's coming, right?
Sound suppressors, they don't silence the sound like they do in movies. They bring it down to a decibel level where you don't necessarily need hearing protection. So that way, you could have a conversation with somebody or listen to instruction while you're shooting. You'll still hear the gun. It'll still be loud enough that your neighbors will hear it, but it won't be damaging to the shooter if they didn't have ear protection.
To be a
So
consequence
you
of
can't
having
use a
gun.
Bose? You can't get little headphones and
You could, but then how do you speak to someone or get instruction or
You
hear, if you're out? Well,
it just flips me when I start seeing we're dealing with sound suppressing systems.
And it may benefit certain areas where they live close to a gun range, right? So we have the police gun range that's 1,000 feet from Walden Woods.
Well, Sunday morning, you can wake up and you hear nipmuck.
Right.
Sure.
Pop, pop, pop.
Perfect example, Nipmuc Club. There's a brand new residential development right across the street from the gun range. They would benefit if those gun owners could use some type of sound suppression to be better neighbors.
But wait a minute. When you go out there on a Sunday morning and we took our cohibas and we sat there and let loose different, guns, I wasn't thinking of quiet. It was fun just to hear.
You don't have to use a suppressor, but you should have the option.
Okay.
This sort of points up my issue with the NRA, of which I am a member. The NRA basically will oppose any law that even leans in the direction
Of
of
control.
regulating gun control.
Yeah.
Right.
They are the Rottweiler watchdog for the Second Amendment. And you don't always need a Rottweiler. And I think that, I have a hard time justifying using sound suppression. It all sounds like rationalization to me.
Sure.
There are things that don't make any sense that the NRA stands up to just because they've envisioned it as their job.
Almost like dogma, right? You have to, any crack at all, you
Right.
have to be against
They're
it.
looking at a crack in the dam.
Yes.
My suspicion is people who make these decisions for the NRA really don't believe it. But they feel it's their
Now,
obligation
The
to take
outcome
that
of Las
stand.
Vegas, a lot of people got hurt, leads to more health care. What's going on with health care? I'm totally
From a
confused.
libertarian perspective,
Well, I listened to the Republicans scream for years. Put me in, coach, I'll fix it. For 7 years and 49 votes or whatever, Obamacare bad. We have better idea.
So when push came to shove, they ended up with 3 senators, Republican senators, that essentially reneged on their promise to repeal Obamacare. You can argue, whether that was their intent, like if they had the right bill, but that's not what they ran on. They didn't run on saying, if I see the right bill to repeal Obamacare, I will do it. They said, vote me in, I will repeal it, and they failed to do so.
Now, Michael, here's my problem with the whole process. Replace and repeal sounded logical to me. Show me something better,
yeah.
then scrap the old one. Repeal and then figure out what to replace with, I don't understand.
Well, why not? Because the point was that they were against the Affordable Care Act, I'll call it its actual name. And so the point was what we had before the Affordable Care Act was better. So just eliminate what the last president put in place. I don't have to give any,
So
don't have to have any
if
other
they repealed
solution.
it, Michael, it was the idea was to go back
It's going to be back to 2007, right?
Correct.
Back to the beginning.
But now, what worries me, to be frank, is that I see nothing happening but Affordable Care Act, Obamacare imploding.
Well, only because I think everybody agreed that it wasn't a perfect solution, and the idea was to try to make it better, but you have to believe in the idea that government should be in the business of giving health care to the people. And the Libertarian would say, you're on your own. You need to be able to support your family.
It's a service provided by medical
But I was
professionals.
in St. Vincent's emergency room a couple of weeks ago because I had tweaked my knee dancing at my niece's wedding. And there in the emergency room was a nice big sign, which was, of course, health care before the Affordable Care Act, which said, you have a right to be treated in an emergency room. It's the law.
If it's an emergency situation.
Right, but typically, emergency rooms become the de facto health care provider of most people that
See,
can afford
that's
it.
one of the things, when we talk
Because
about
everything's an emergency.
providing health care to everybody, well, we do anyway.
We do anyway.
If you talk to Jeff Hopkins up here at our regional center,
Yeah.
he'll tell you point blank, there's no way that somebody comes in sick, hurt, whatever, and he says Visa or MasterCard before he lets them in the door.
Of course not.
He says,
Maybe at that hospital, but I just heard today, I work in the medical field, that there's a certain hospital in Boston, I won't
Well, they take
call
it,
them
yeah.
out, that if you don't have insurance, they say, well, here's the information for BMC, Boston Medical Center.
Well,
They'll take
BMC's
you.
become the
Yeah, they'll
dumping
take
ground.
you,
I mean, there are
but
laws
we won't
against-
treat
there
you
are laws
here
against
because
that.
it's not life-threatening.
how-
Well, that's the city
That's
hospital.
If I
That's a
showed up to
$50,000
man's
fine
greatest
per offense.
hospital, I show up to MGH, and I say, I'm illegal. I have no coverage whatsoever. I didn't think they could turn you away.
I don't think they can. Well, first of all, ethically, they can't.
Well, that's that old, you remember the old Hippo guy?
Hippocratic
You know, the
Oath?
Hippocratic Oath? Yeah, Mr. Hippo there.
Right, that's what I'm
seemed-
saying. That's an ethical.
I mean, you
I
swore
doubt
an
there are
oath
physicians.
to do no harm.
If that patient, that person gets as far as the physician or gets as far as a nurse, they're going to be treated.
Okay, that makes more sense, because when you think of what medical providers train for, the amount of years they put in, they swear to uphold the Hippocratic Oath, I just can't see them turning their back on a sick kid.
Well,
I've never seen it happen.
And as a society, would we step over dying people on the
Michael,
sidewalk?
that was the whole idea when
Right.
we had the argument about the kids from Texas that came to Milford, that we had people stand up and say, send them back. And I laughed. I said, you know, I'd really like to see, not on a theoretical debate, but to see you standing on the border and some little kid come up to you who's hurting saying, please help me,
Right.
and you turn your back. I don't know, there's probably somebody in Milford that would, and if there is, I hope they'd move, because that's not Milford.
But that's the citizenry. That's, the Libertarian would say, any citizen can help another person. You can go for it, but should government be doing it? Should we be funding all of this through our taxes to help people as a state-run type
So
of
now,
socialist type
what do you do
of
with the
environment?
medical system today, that you're getting to one insurance company bidding? There's certain states that have one Obamacare provider, and the rates are going up and up and up because they're not sure that the government will subsidize the low-income people. To me, that's the system imploding. What do you do?
The death of the American system of healthcare started in the 80s when the UAW insisted, under threat of strike, that their membership be provided what they called first dollar coverage. That if you got a cold, your insurer was supposed to buy you a handkerchief. That's not what insurance is. That's prepaid medical care. That's not insurance.
But Arthur, isn't
If
that
you have
why-
car insurance, do you expect to pay nothing
Well,
for
isn't
your
that
car?
why GM went bankrupt?
I don't know
I mean,
why GM went bankrupt.
My
but
mother, my dad died 30 years ago. He opted for the UAW plan that said either he could take his full pension, like $500 a month, until he died, or he could take $300 and some dollars until he and my mother died. No, my mother's outlived him by 30 years. Up until a few years ago, they had her on Medicare, not Medicaid, but Medicare, and the UAW picked up 100% of any medical claim she had, regardless. That's 30 years they're still paying.
That's prepaid medical
tremendous.
care. That's not health insurance.
Well, that's not insurance, it was everything.
Yeah.
You name it, if
But that
she
was
got a
health-
bill.
That was a healthcare policy. It's not insurance. That's healthcare. You're taking care of this person's health. Great, terrific. If you have it.
But it was like Maggie Thatcher once said about socialism. Socialism is great till you run out of other people's money. And that's what General Motors ran out of.
But to Arthur's point, the way healthcare insurance is provided these days, it's not just for catastrophic care. I mean, if you have home insurance, your house burns down, you're covered.
but you
if-
have a deductible.
You have a
Yeah.
deductible.
If
Okay,
my
sure.
window breaks or my shutter
If-
goes off, I pay for it. 'Cause
Correct. You don't make a claim if your boiler goes out. I
You're
mean,
not going to claim for $300 because it's your deductible.
No, but
So
I
the
had
same
a very
thing.
intelligent patient who was diabetic, and she was on 3 medications, 1 for her blood pressure, 2 for her diabetes, one of which cost pennies a day. and she lost her insurance. So she decided, this otherwise very intelligent person decided she wasn't going to take any medication because she had no insurance to pay for it. She was not taking a medication that could have tided her over, or at least made things less severe, for literally 4 cents a day, because her insurance
But Arthur,
wouldn't pay for it.
You take that diabetic and you say, okay, today, and my rotundness makes me a type 2 diabetic. I pay $300 a month for my Lantus pens. They're $1,500. My metformin that cost me $10, I think is like $200. You start adding it up. Without insurance, you're at $2,000, $3,000 a month. There's a lot of people out there, especially on Social Security.
Sure.
They don't make $3,000 or $2,000 a month.
The drug costs are an entirely
Well, that's
different
part of the
topic
whole
we
issue,
could
though,
spend.
Arthur, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Eliquis, for example, is crazy. You can't afford that if you're on fixed income and you're retired and on Social Security. It's horrible.
Part of the problem is because these health insurance companies are so large, they make these deals with healthcare providers and say, give me the best rate. And to balance that, because of course they're a huge customer, they're going to give them the best rate, they have to make up that difference with the uninsured. And so you end up having, a procedure would cost $300 for everybody. Well, to give the health insurance provider, $100 for that procedure, they have to jack up the price to $700 for all the uninsured. So you end up paying more because you're uninsured, because
Then how do you
the
fix
healthcare.
it?
Well, there's again, I'm an advocate of having catastrophic insurance only. I will pay when I want to go see Arthur for a doctor's appointment. Here's $200. Here's my checkup, and if I, God forbid, got cancer that's going to cost me $100,000 a year, that's when the insurance would kick in. If I twist my knee, okay, I'm going to pay out of pocket the $2,000.
But what
And you have a healthcare structure that has grown up knowing that you can charge more and get paid more by insurance companies for things that really aren't worth more. We talked for a long time about cognitive and technical services. If I sit and think about your case, or if I listen to your heart carefully and decide that that murmur that you have is probably mild mitral regurgitation and it's nothing to worry about,
Right.
nobody's going to pay me any more than if I just slapped a stethoscope on your chest for 2 seconds and then ordered a $600 echocardiogram to get my answer.
Yeah, there's no incentive for low-cost service.
So what do? The system around us is not working. I mean, you can say Obamacare, not Obama. It isn't working. Because when you look at rates going up 30, 40%, now if the government said, Michael, you're on Social Security, you can afford $150 a month out of your $1,200 for health care. When the insurance companies jack the rates 30, 40%, my understanding is you can't afford a 40% increase, so the government has to make it up. So they're really charging us again. To your argument, they're charging the non-insured, the taxpayers, for the people who can't afford it.
Absolutely.
But what do? Do you not provide health care to the people who can't afford it?
No, you don't. Is health care a right? We could argue about that for a long time, but I think we've reached a point in the United States where it's treated as a right. So that's the practicality you have to deal with. But the question is, yes, you have a right to health care. Who exactly is it that has the obligation to give it to you? Which individuals have the obligation to give it to you?
Well, again, I think about why aren't there many vaccine companies out there? Because there's no money in it. If you think about every child gets vaccinated for
Plus
mumps, rubella,
The liability is
and they turned around and, because something goes wrong for the rest of the kid's life, but the cost. The state years ago said there's no way in heck we can pay market rates to vaccinate every child. So they set up in Jamaica Plain a production facility that makes all the vaccine for the state. So haven't we kind of already made a decision on certain things that we have to protect all the children? We have to vaccinate everybody, and to do it affordably, the state is going to run the
Well,
facility.
vaccination is a unique situation in which there's such a thing as herd immunity. They call us a herd. You know, where my kid is at risk because your kid isn't vaccinated.
Right.
Right, no, altogether, right.
That's why you have, and I agree with, the legal requirement to have your kid vaccinated. And if
But see,
because
now
it's
here's
not
your problem.
because you're not making the decision just for your kid.
Right.
That's your right
Here's
to
the
make the
issue
decision
I
for your
have.
kid.
We say we want all of our children educated. Now, when they were in preschool, I used to call it the incubator, because the minute one kid came in with an illness, touching, licking different toys, the whole herd got infected.
That's not bad.
Well, no, it builds up your immune system, but wait a minute. If I stop treating or pre-treating polio, measles, and I let a kid, I mean, we've had an issue with a lot of people coming from different parts of the world where TB, we never thought of TB for many, many decades.
Right.
And now all of a sudden we had to. So when you shake your head saying, I don't want my child vaccinated.
No. I said I don't want it to be a legal requirement. And I'll explain quickly the difference. Arthur, you would agree that any medication has some risk regardless of how small.
Absolutely.
So you are requiring me to take a risk, regardless of how minute or insignificant you believe it is, for your benefit. To me, that is...
The benefit of
No,
society.
the benefit of society. There's a difference.
Well, wait a minute. No, you're not. You're only, wait a minute. Let me just make sure I understand this. There is no legal requirement to vaccinate a child.
No, but
There's
he was
only
suggesting...
a legal requirement if you want to go to a public school.
But he
And
was-
if
to
the kid
vaccinate.
doesn't go to school,
That's what I'm saying.
well, you can
if I'm in
homeschool.
Idaho,
So I just
and
want to
I'm
make
sitting
sure...
out in
'cause-
Idaho and I'm homeschooling and I never leave my little hut, teepee, whatever.
Because the suggestion was to make it a legal requirement across the board. Now, if you make it a legal requirement into a public school, I think that's a little different. Of course, then you run into the exceptions list, right? I have
If somebody is allergic or there's
yeah,
also the
or there's a
religious
religious
right test.
exemption. But the problem with that is, why should you have a religious exemption if I have a moral objection? Why is yours superior?
Yeah,
to
but
mine?
let me backtrack, because Mike's point is correct. I think in order to attend a public school, you need to have your child vaccinated. That should be a legal requirement.
Yes.
If you don't want them vaccinated, child can't go to school.
Of course, libertarians would tell you there shouldn't even be a public school. but that's
Religious
beside the point.
objection, I think, has nothing to do with it.
Well,
You
the
read my
problem I
mind,
have
Mike.
with religious objection or exemption
Yeah.
is, okay, if I am a devout Buddhist or a devout Muslim, and I say, I believe you being a Catholic, a Christian, a Jew, is going to condemn your children not to the good place. Well, wait a minute. Where does that go? If I start saying, well, I have a religious objection to something,
No, but some
how
people,
far do you take it?
It's not about your.
Do you say I don't like Christians, so I'm not going to let them in the
absolutely
door?
not. A lot of religions believe in the purity of the body and the soul. They're one. They're connected. So if they believe that a foreign substance
Right.
is
No foreign treatment.
contaminating their
Right.
religious, body and soul, they should have the right to object. Now, to Arthur's point, maybe that means that they can't attend a public school. But then
not-
you have certain individuals who
In the
can't
beginning
because of a
of the
medical
show,
reason.
Michael.
Do you then say those with medical reasons can't attend a
But
public school? Then do you
Let's
run
get to
into
the medical
ADA
second.
issues?
But in the beginning of the show, you told me a libertarian believes in individual rights as long as they don't affect somebody else's. I would argue with you
they
that
infringe on someone else's
infringe
rights.
on somebody else's right. I would argue with you that if you're bringing in a child for what, not medical, but you don't believe in vaccination, or you believe that they become autistic.
Autistic, right.
You know, the quack who said you vaccinate your kids, you become autistic.
Well, who was that guy?
No, who cares?
Now, turn around and say, wait a minute, aren't you kind of making a decision that you're going to expose my child and all my neighbors' children?
Well, you have the option to homeschool.
Why should I?
Why should?
Because you
I
got,
mean,
because in my libertarian view, you have individual rights and individual responsibilities.
Okay.
And if you have the individual right not to have your child vaccinated, then you have the individual responsibility to raise that child to be a functioning adult, and that involves education, and you have to get it. You are obligated, in my mind, I'm not going to enforce it.
That-
You're obligated to see that that child gets educated, and if public school is not an option because of a choice you've made, you got to do it some other way.
Well, and that I'm okay with, but I'm paying my taxes for the Milford Elementary Schools to be in existence. I'm willing to live up to the vaccination and all to protect the herd. He says, I'm bringing in my kid, no vaccination. Why should my child be at risk?
So what I would
Shouldn't
say is sickness is a part of life. It's nature. I mean,
Well, we don't want epidemics anymore.
I'm
do we,
willing to
Michael?
bet.
Measles?
I'm willing to bet
Polio?
all of us have had chicken pox.
How about scarlet fever?
Okay.
There's now a vaccine for chicken pox.
Yes.
So even though we've all had chicken pox and survived it and whatnot, you're saying that I would be putting my hypothetical child that isn't vaccinated, my kids are vaccinated, at a significant risk of your child's health because of chicken pox?
You can get shingles later, right?
Again,
It's a different
But wait a minute.
mechanism.
But,
Wait a minute.
I mean,
but Michael,
where-
think about TB.
where do we
had
draw the
to
line?
invest
Well,
in the Visiting Nurse Association because we have people coming into Milford who have TB. And we were giving them medication and they weren't being compliant. So we had to invest so that the VNA goes and says, here's a pill, take it in front of me. Am I infringing on their right? Yeah, kind of, but wait a minute. I don't want TB spreading to my family.
Right. Of
So
course.
I got a hard time, not drawing a line saying when you're endangering the entire herd for personal reasons, I don't know if I can support you.
Isn't that the purpose of the Constitution from the beginning? The framers, the preamble, talks about how far the government, the country, should go to protecting its people.
So one thing I guess could be an alternative is instead of, disease doesn't spontaneously come out. It's
You mean set up like a leper colony?
No, I'm saying you can do screening, and if we do effective screening, we could in quarantine when someone is infected, it could have a similar effect to that of vaccination.
What are you screening for?
Pardon?
What would you be screening for?
Whatever disease. I'm
that-
not an expert.
No, but
Again,
we're talking about at least as much infringement on somebody's rights
you
by
go down that
forcing them
path.
to screen
Right.
and then quarantining them as you are a
Worse.
2-second
See,
needle
the problem
in
I'd
arm.
have is if I screen you today, you're clean. You haven't been vaccinated. You come in contact with somebody with measles. Okay, how often do I screen you? And to me, that's more invasive than saying, you want to be in the herd? There are certain things, you get to the age-old argument of what's pornography. But yet we've been able to say, as a herd, anything to do with children, verboten. I don't care about that pesky First Amendment.
Well,
I don't care.
The interesting thing about chickenpox is that it's pretty much a benign disease in kids. And it's a potentially fatal disease
In adults.
And there's a small percentage, but not immaterial, percentage of adults who never had chickenpox.
Right. I had it very late, and it's not good when you have it later.
The other thing
People
is,
die
I remember
in adulthood
when
from
my daughter
chickenpox.
got chickenpox, my wife went nonlinear because she asked me and asked my mother, did you have chickenpox? And I was like, I don't think so. Now, my oldest daughter, when she got it, what do kids want to do? She came and curled up under my arm. And my wife said, are you out of your ever-loving mind if you don't think you've had chickenpox? Do you know what the shingles, what it can do to you? But it's my daughter. She's hurting. I'm going to hold her and I'll deal with it. Turns out my youngest daughter had 3 pox. And what we now surmise is I must have gotten chicken pox like my youngest daughter and had 2 or 3 pox that,
Yeah, most people who think they didn't have chickenpox did.
yeah,
I didn't know. I got 3 pox. I don't know.
When the
was it-
kids were younger, you wanted to put them together to
the
get
few
something,
that
right?
don't, right,
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 didn't
yeah,
you? You brought your kids,
absolutely.
hey, he has chicken pox, bring the kids over.
Put them all together in the same room so they all get it now
All
and get it
get
over
it, and
with.
it's all
Well,
done.
and my mother.
Which is a sort of a crude vaccination.
Vaccination.
My
Yeah,
mother
sure.
at 94 got shingles. It was frightening. Her entire back
Right.
looked like somebody beat her.
Just to clarify, you can't get shingles if you hadn't had chickenpox.
Right.
It's the second manifestation of the disease.
But you start thinking about it. There's certain things that have a much dire outcome as an adult. Kids are processing viruses so quickly that, okay, they get it, they're gone, and
But what I don't know the answer to this, but it's worth asking. If you've been inoculated for chickenpox as a kid, are you susceptible to developing shingles later in life? I don't know the answer to that.
I know I just spent
We're gonna
money to
find
be
out.
harpooned, Arthur, for the shingles vaccine.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but I decided, okay, go ahead and
Because
harpoon
you
me.
saw what your mother went through.
Right, of course.
Now, medically, is there a high probability I'll get it? I don't know.
Don't know.
But the bottom line here is ideas are never so good that they have to be mandated. If again, I vaccinate my children. I'm vaccinated, except for I don't like the flu vaccine, but it's a good. I see the benefit in it, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm suggesting otherwise. I understand that vaccines are good. I still think you should have the right, if you have any doubt in your mind, to say no.
So-
There's 3 guiding principles as a libertarian. Stay out of my wallet, stay out of my bedroom, and stay out of my body. Those are my 3 guiding principles when it comes to being a libertarian. And that would violate the stay out of my body principle, because you should be able to convince me that it's to my benefit to take this.
But when we go back to that pesky First Amendment, aren't we saying the same thing? I mean, realistically, I should have the right to do what I want as long as I don't infringe upon your rights.
Well, here's the interesting question that came up just last week in Boston with it was required by the Brigham that their nurses be inoculated.
Well, that's a condition of
vaccinated against
employment. That's
flu.
not a condition of the government saying you have to be.
Right, it caused quite a kerfuffle. Milford Hospital, on the other hand, requires you either get the vaccine or you wear a mask for the entire flu season.
Oh.
I kind of like the Brigham's idea better. It works better, but there are subsets of the population who really
Well,
do need.
we don't have enough time to talk about it on this session, but the next session, question comes up from your own individual rights. Should a company be able to tell you you can't smoke marijuana? You can't drink?
A company can tell you anything it
A
wants.
company should be able to tell you anything it wants as a condition of employment, and you can say, no, thank you, I'm going to find different employment.
Right, or, I mean, the whole thing about the everything that's happening with the football games and the taking the knee and the like. Yeah, it's your right to express your opinion, but
Let's spend a couple minutes on
can't.
that. How do you feel about somebody taking a knee or throwing a finger or doing any type of gesture towards the national anthem or our flag?
So let me just finish that. So you have a right to do it, but you don't have a right to not, and a friend of mine said this to me, and he's right, you don't have the consequences of your actions. You're not immune to consequences of your actions. So you can, if you're and go to work, that's because football players are going to work, right? I can go to my job and do something and protest, but it doesn't mean there's not going to be a
Raytheon's
consequence
management's not
from
going to be
it.
happy with you.
They could very well, right? Because I'm not,
But
I have no contract. there.
again,
So,
as we
yeah, so
talked
you have a
about
right
before.
to protest. Hopefully, you're protesting because you want to see a better society. The idea is to make things better. That's the whole journey we're on here.
But don't
to
we
make
hit a
things
point
better.
where I have the right to make fun of Mother Swartz?
Yes.
It's my right. But it doesn't feel
course not.
right. I mean,
Stand up and take your hat off at the national anthem.
well, that's
You-
why,
you
Michael,
could
if you
tell-
did it before the national anthem, take your knee, lay on your back, do circles, then I would sit there and say, First Amendment, cool. That anthem comes up,
Stand up.
stand up.
It's the right of every person in that stadium, every fan, to sit or kneel during the national anthem. It's their right. It's the right of the players to do that until the owner says, if you do it again, you're fired.
And everybody's
And I stand, and I like to see people stand.
Yeah.
That's what
But see,
people
again,
should do.
I would more accept
Mm-hmm.
you kneeling, rolling, barking like a dog, whatever, after the anthem is done
Or before.
or before.
And I don't
Which is what
Right.
that's where it's all heading. I think what happened the first time was created by Trump, not by any people that suddenly had decided that they were with Colin Kaepernick's.
No, he was
Well,
already yesterday's
Kaepernick
news.
is funny because you hear, well, poor Kaepernick, because he protested, he can't get a job. Now, if you were an owner, would you pick him up?
Well, the
I
fact
call
is,
that affirmative action for the NFL. I mean, really.
I just don't think he's
If
that
he's
good
not
a
good
quarterback.
enough-
Well, I mean, but Michael, if you had two quarterbacks, and there's plenty out there, equal, and one was very controversial, why would you pick him? I don't care what the controversy is.
And it kind of brings back why doesn't the NFL enforce this? I mean, you would think they would want to avoid controversy at all costs. So they would tell their players, your code of conduct says you stand during the anthem because we want to avoid being political.
can't
They want to be neutral and everything.
They have rules that you can't put a sticker on
Yeah.
your uniform,
So your socks have to be.
But
the
now
same
you
or
have
your
size.
fans-
socks or your sneakers.
Now you have fans burning
cleats.
team flags, saying they'll never watch NFL again. And this is exactly what the NFL doesn't want. So it would be in their best interest to have some sort of code of conduct and say, listen, outside of the game, outside of practice, when you're not in uniform, you can do
what
whatever
you
you
want.
want. But
Or
as a
not.
condition of employment,
But it's like you holding an anti-Zoomblatt poster in the middle of Raytheon.
Right.
Wait a minute. You don't have to be here.
Right,
But if-
exactly right. And the problem is with what I found with the football players is that, and if I was a coach, I would say your focus is to be ready for this game. The teams that seem to have protested the most that first week played the worst football.
Right. Yeah.
So
Because their head wasn't
that's
focused.
right. I mean, you're going to go out there in a gladiator sport. You better be focused.
Yeah, the Lions are focused. They're hungry. The Gladiators better keep their heads kind
And
of
we're not
focused.
talking about the Detroit Lions, but
No, but
where did the chickens fall?
It would take further focus.
thank you guys. As always, thank you to our 6 loyal viewers. It's good to hear all sides of an argument. I don't think in this show you'll ever hear me saying this is the right way or the wrong way, because I think that's what makes our country great, and letting everybody do what they feel is right, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people, just feels right. But as always, thanks for joining. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. And I hope that the 6 watch again. Good night, all.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life.